funding to that measure. Also expected soon, legislation to extend programs and funding structures for the Federal Aviation Administration, along with some surface transportation provisions. Current FAA authorization expires on Friday. This is live Senate coverage now on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. As we come into your presence today, O Lord, we, like Isaiah of old, need to be cleansed from our sinfulness. Forgive us for our failures and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Today, use our lawmakers so that their actions will help provide for the security and well-being of all people. Sustain our senators with the protection of your providence and give them your peace. Give them also a spirit of unity and the wisdom to have respect one for the other. Lord, thank you for the redemption you provide for your people. Holy and awesome is your name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Morning. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., September 14, 2011. To the Senate, under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby appoint the Honorable Kirsten E. Gillibrand, a senator from the state of New York, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Majority Leader.
Now, Republicans will control the first half and majority will control the final half. Following morning business, Senate will resume consideration. Motion to proceed H.J.R.S. 66, which is now a resolution regarding Burma sanctions and the legislative vehicle for FEMA funding. We expect to begin consideration of this legislation today. We also hope to consider FAA and highway extension, which we received from the House yesterday. Senators will be notified when the votes are scheduled. Madam President, the House sent us a package, and I appreciate that very much. It funds the highway bill for 6 months, and it funds the FEMA bill for 4 months. That's terrific. Now, we should move to this just as quickly as we can. However, we're told it's going to be held up by the Republicans. If someone wants to have a vote on an amendment that as it relates to this, I'll be happy to discuss this with the Republican leader, see if we can work something out. In the instance I'm talking about, however, the senator said he doesn't want to vote. He just wants to hold the bill up. He said he said if we put in what we got from the House and stuck his provision in that, then he would be happy. Well, I guess anyone would, Madam President. It's a pretty good way to legislate around here, just be a dictator and say either take this or leave it. That isn't how things work around here. We have to have votes on issues to find out how people feel. I'm convinced that his issue would lose overwhelmingly. But he's holding this legislation up. And we are in a position now legislatively that I can't get to this bill. We cannot get to this bill prior to Friday when the FAA expires. So it's unfortunate, but that's the position we're in. One senator is holding this up, and what it will do is the highway bill does not expire on Friday, FAA does. But they're a package. And if this continues, we will have about 80,000 people out of work by Saturday. 4,000 that work for the FAA, and about 70 or 75,000 that are working on airport construction jobs. In Las Vegas, for example, there's a new tower being built because of McCarran Field being overwhelmed with the old tower can't handle things well, and those people will be laid off. And that's the way it is all over the country. And that's very, very unfortunate. We are, and I really appreciate, Madam President, and I've tried to say individually, I haven't been to each Republican senator, but the senators have voted to help us move forward on funding for FEMA. I really appreciate it. As you know, we have a majority, but it's not a huge majority, and we always need to get things done on issues that are specialized. We need 7 Republicans, and we got 8 Republicans in this instance that helped us pass this legislation. All the Democratic senators voted for this, and we got those Republicans. This allows us now to fund FEMA. I have told my friends on the other side of the Republican side of the aisle, if it's something that they want to change the numbers around, let's have a discussion on that. But right now, people are desperate. Last night, about 6 o'clock or 6:30, I spoke to the man that's in charge of the in charge of FEMA. And he said we're spending money every day on Lee and on Irene. These are not a couple women. One's a tropical storm and the other is a hurricane. They're not spending money other places. Why? Because they don't have the money. As the presiding officer knows, there are people in her state who've lost their homes. This is all up and down the aisle. The coast. From the coast of Florida up to Maine, and places even inward. From the, as we talked about yesterday, some of the real severe damage was not on the coastline, but, for example, in the state of Vermont, the worst storm likely they've ever had. And those people are trying to get from one place to the next. They have bridges, scores of bridges that are inoperable. And that money, what money they have left in FEMA will run out, I think, he said on the 25th. If things keep going the way they are, the 25th of this money, they will be out of money, no money. So we need to get this done. But procedurally, we're on this. And I can't move to the highway bill and the FAA bill. And I repeat, the FAA bill expires. So I hope that we can have something work out with this senator, that we can get this bill done. The disasters facing this country are untoward. 48 states have already had emergency declarations. Some states have had multiple emergency declarations. Only 2 states, West Virginia and Michigan, have not had emergency declarations. We've had, in the state of Texas, an example, 20,000 fires since the first of the year. Sunday alone, 19 fires. Millions of acres have burned. 2,000 homes burned to the ground. That's what FEMA is all about. FEMA is an organization that's relatively new. But, Madam President, we have been helping people as a country who have had disasters since we've been a country. In the early 1800s, see when that was. There was a big fire in the state of New Hampshire. The date, I believe, is 1813. The federal government stepped in to help with the rebuilding there. That's the way it should be. That's what our country's all about. And we shouldn't. I'm sorry, Madam President. It was 1803. 1803, the federal government played a role in rebuilding after a calamity in New Hampshire. Congress passed legislation that year to help New Hampshire recover from the devastating fire they had. FEMA was established in 1979. To this point, it appears that this could very likely be the worst disaster year in the history of the country. Irene alone is one of the 5 worst disasters monetarily that we've had in this country. So I would hope that my Republican colleagues would work with us and help us move these things along. It's important we do this. It's important we do it as quickly as we can so that people in Joplin, Missouri, and other places in the country who have been devastated can receive help from the federal government that they deserve. Would the Chair announce the business for the day?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the 2 leaders or their designees, with the Republicans controlling the first half and the majority controlling the final half.
Madam President,
Majority
there are
Leader.
3 bills at the desk due for second reading.
The clerk will read the titles of the bills on block, for the second reading on block.
S-1549, a bill to provide tax relief for American workers and businesses and so forth. H.R. 2832, an act to extend the generalized system of preferences and for other purposes. H.R. 2887, an act to provide an extension of surface and air transportation programs and for other purposes.
Madam President, I object to any further proceedings with respect to these 3 bills.
Objection is heard. The bills will be placed on the calendar.
President.
Senator from Nebraska.
Madam President, are we in quorum call?
Not yet.
Okay. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that we be allowed to engage in a colloquy with my Republican colleagues, Senator Roberts, Portman, Hoeven, Blunt, and Isaacson, and in the event that the minority leader does appear to offer comments, that we interrupt our colloquy for the minority leader to speak.
Without objection.
Madam President, I rise today with my colleagues to talk about trade and the importance of trade, and specifically to talk about 3 pending trade agreements. When I say pending, man alive, am I emphasizing pending? These agreements have been around a very long time, and I'm referring to Korea, Panama, and Colombia. We all know the benefits of trade in the United States. In Nebraska, my home state, more than 19,000 jobs and more than $5.5 billion in revenue were directly tied to exports last year. We often hear in trade discussions about the need to level the playing field. Well, these agreements do exactly that. They eliminate tariffs and a whole host of other barriers on most agricultural products, including products that are important to, again, to my state, beef, corn, soybeans, and pork. No doubt about it, they increase the opportunities, the economic opportunities for Nebraska farmers and ranchers, for businesses, and for workers. Well, for 3 years, we've heard the President say the right thing. In fact, every time he would say something about this, I thought, finally, the trade agreements are going to bust loose, and we're going to have an opportunity to vote on them. He said in last year's State of the Union, quote, "If America sits on the sidelines while other nations sign trade deals, we will lose the chance to create jobs on our shores." unquote. Well, then again in May, the President called for, quote, a robust, forward-looking trade agenda that emphasizes exports and domestic job growth. Just last week, the President noted that now is the time, he said, quote, a series of trade agreements that would make it easier for American companies to sell their products in Panama, Colombia, and South Korea, unquote. Now is the time. Well, if now is the time, why is the administration continuing to fail to act? It's been 1,538 days since the Korea Agreement was signed. It's been 1,540 days since the Panama Agreement was signed. And it's been 1,758 days since we completed negotiations with Colombia. As I said, I have colleagues with me today that are in a much better position than I would be to explain the impacts, the positive impacts of these trade agreements. And so I am going to ask that Senator Roberts speak first, Senator Portman, Senator Hoeven, Senator Blunt, and Senator Isaacson. And it is my hope that if there's time permitting, I will wrap up. Senator Roberts, please, as the ranking member, former chairman of the House Ag Committee, ranking member of the Senate Ag Committee today, how important are these agreements to agriculture and job creation in the United States?
Madam President, I thank my colleague and dear friend from Nebraska for the question. In the end, the biggest consequence for inaction is the number one issue that is now facing our nation, our biggest challenge. It's called jobs. In regards to his question, the three pending trade agreements add up to $13 billion, $13 billion, in additional exports and an estimated 250,000 jobs. From the ag perspective, the three pending trade agreements represent $2.5 billion if they are ever implemented. The estimates are that the three agreements in total are expected to increase the direct exports by $129.5 million just for Kansas farmers and ranchers, and an additional 1,150 jobs for our state. For the folks on the farm, why these export markets are absolutely critical. Approximately one-third of our crop production is exported. For wheat, that number jumps to one-half. The administration's prolonged delay is causing U.S. businesses and producers to simply lose market share. We're losing out. Other countries are not waiting. They are enacting trade agreements without the United States. Let me give you a real good example. The Canada trade agreement went into force on August 15 of this year. Already, Nutricia, the largest food processor in Colombia, has announced it will source all of their wheat from Canada to take advantage of the lower duties. Now the Canadian wheat will receive from the trade agreement. Nutricia's wheat demand alone represents 50% of all wheat imports to that country. Our Kansas Farm Bureau estimates that Kansas farmers stand to lose $21 million from lost wheat sales alone and $38 million from lost sales of all ag exports by doing just nothing on the trade agreement. Soon after the United States negotiated the trade agreement with Korea, the European Union followed suit. In July, the Korea-European Union trade agreement went into effect, and according to Korean customs, within the first 29 days of July, I would tell my friend, the European exports were up 34%. Now get this one. Notably, aerospace equipment increased by a whopping 1,693%. That's astounding. Well, Kansas is a major player in the aviation sector, exporting $2.7 billion in transportation equipment in 2010, last year. As the aviation capital of the world, why Wichita's aviation companies and 140,000 workers have much to lose in trying to compete against the European Union. It is long, long overdue time for the President to put some action behind his words. Send up the 3 trade agreements to Congress immediately. Now, I'm going to make a statement that I regret to say. Trade assistance notwithstanding, I am very sad to say I don't believe we're going to see any trade agreement this year or the next. And I hope that my prediction is not correct. This is ridiculous. Every third foggy night, the President makes a speech and says, we need these trade agreements. We're losing market share. Well, I don't see the trade agreements. These aren't the trade agreements. Maybe somebody can find them here on the floor of the House. Maybe they're somewhere, but I think they're in the White House. And until we get the politics out of this and the President sends the trade agreements here, what on earth is he doing saying that we should pass these trade agreements? We don't have the bill. Send us the bill, Mr. President. So as the administration delays moving forward on these agreements with Korea, with Panama, and Colombia, what's happening to American exports to these important markets? Senator Portman, you're an expert on this. There isn't anybody in this Senate who is more of an expert on trade. If you apply the administration's own metrics, how many jobs will be created, I'm not talking about lost, I mean created by these pending agreements?
Well, first of all, I thank my colleague from Kansas who has just made the case eloquently as to why we need to move forward on this. To answer his question, when you apply the metrics that the President of the United States and his administration have used for these 3 trade agreements alone, they would create 250,000 new jobs. Now, I would ask my colleagues with 9% unemployment and continued bad economic news, can't we use those jobs? By the way, jobs that are related to trade tend to be higher paying, tend to have more benefits. This is exactly what we need to do in this Senate, in the House, and here in Washington, is to put the partisanship aside and move forward on things that make sense to create jobs. I can't think of something that would be having a more immediate impact on those exporters you talked about, Senator Roberts, who right now are seeing their market share eroded because the United States is sitting on its hands. In 2006, the Colombian agreement was finalized. Now, it's been tinkered with since then, but, we're talking 5 years ago. Unbelievable. And while we have sat on our hands and not moved forward with giving our farmers and our workers and our service providers the chance to go into that Colombian market, you're exactly right. They've gone ahead and made trade agreements with other folks. And Colombia is a great example of this. Back when we negotiated this agreement and completed it, and I was the U.S. trade rep then, as you indicate, and I negotiated it directly with the then President of Colombia, President Uribe, who made lots of concessions, including on manufacturing, agriculture, services. At that time, we had a 71% market share in terms of exports of agricultural products, wheat, corn, and soybeans into Colombia. 71% market share. Today, that market share is about 26%. Why? Because after we completed our agreement with Colombia, they engaged with other countries, including the Mercosur countries, Argentina and Brazil, and now they're buying their products instead from those countries that got their act together, moved forward with trade agreements that this President will not get his act together on and send to us. And as Senator Roberts has just said, then just recently, this summer, 15th of August, they completed an agreement with Canada. Well, guess what the Canadians love to export? The same kind of wheat we love to export. And so you're right, they're going to take the wheat market away from Kansas, from North Dakota, from other states that really need those jobs and need those exports. So we've got to move forward on this, and it's really a crime that we haven't been able to provide our farmers, our workers, our service providers these opportunities. I'll give you another.
Would the Senator yield for one quick question?
Yes, absolutely.
Would the Senator yield for one quick question?
Yes.
You've been there. You've done the negotiating. You know that these trade agreements not only apply to our exports but our national security. What has this done, this delay and continued delay, what does it do to the credibility of the people who are actually negotiating, our trade reps?
Unfortunately, I think some of these countries, all 3 of which are great allies of the United States, Panama, Colombia, and South Korea, feel as though the United States has let them down. Now, we're going to move forward here, I believe. I'm more optimistic than the Senator from Kansas. I believe the President will finally send these forward. He has to. I mean, the logic is difficult to escape. Why wouldn't you? And that's good, and we'll be able to move forward, I hope, with not just opening up more markets, but helping on our relationships with these incredibly important allies. But in the meantime, there has been damage done. You're absolutely right. I think they feel as though, in some respects, the rug has been pulled out from under them. They made huge concessions and commitments to the United States and politically took great risks. And frankly, in Colombia and in Panama, where they moved forward immediately to ratify these agreements in their legislature, it wasn't just the administration, it was the elected representatives of the people, as we are, who took great risks to say, yes, we want to be a partner with the United States of America, the greatest economy on the face of the earth, and this beacon of hope and opportunity, and here we are, America, letting them down. So it has had both commercial impacts on the United States. We've lost market share, we've lost jobs because of it, but it also has had impacts, as Senator Roberts says, in terms of our standing in the world. And that's why we've got to move forward, not just with these three, but the really important point to be made here is we've got to move forward with additional agreements. There are over 100 trade agreements being negotiated right now around the world, and because the United States does not have trade promotion authority, the ability for the President to negotiate and bring an agreement back here for an up or down vote, we are not engaged in these agreements. We're engaged in one, which is a regional one, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but none of these bilateral ones, which are where you're really going to get these trade openings and new exports and therefore new jobs. So this is a bigger issue that must be addressed. This Congress, I hope, will address it in the context of the votes we're going to have in connection with these trade agreements that we're going to promote getting the United States back in the game of expanding our trade and helping U.S. jobs. By the way, you mentioned earlier, it's not just that we have the opportunity to create over 200,000 jobs. It's also, if we don't move forward on these three agreements, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has done some analysis showing that we would lose 380,000 jobs. So this sort of goes both ways. There's a cost to not moving forward, and that is also hundreds of thousands of jobs that we desperately need in states like Ohio and in the states represented by the senators who are here on the floor with us today. The International Trade Commission now says these three agreements alone would expand exports annually by $13 billion, again, meaning jobs and opportunity. It's time for us to move forward. Senator Roberts has talked about what's happened with the European Union, which actually negotiated its agreement again after we completed ours. On the auto sector, by the way, there's an EU-Korean agreement now in place that says that the 8% tariff on imported cars is being reduced, already starting to be reduced. That's resulting in companies sending UK cars, including Hondas, that are produced in the United Kingdom, are being exported to South Korea. We have a Honda plant in Ohio, and I visited it recently. There are 4,200 Ohio workers there. We want to export Hondas from Ohio to Korea, and we can do that if we move forward with these agreements. So it's time for us to move forward. It's not the time for us to play politics. We have to move forward because we need these jobs and because, again, the United States should be at the forefront of these agreements in order to not just protect the market share we have, but expand it. 95% of the consumers live outside of our borders, and we need to access those consumers. I would ask now, if I could, one of my colleagues to talk a little about his experience in his state. John Hoeven was governor of North Dakota, and so he was sort of like the trade representative from North Dakota. He was out there promoting trade as governor, and North Dakota is a state that's got a lot of exports, including wheat, as we talked about earlier, and so they're being hit by what Senator Roberts and Senator Johanns talked about in terms of what's happening in Colombia today with the Canadian agreement and also with the EU agreement with Korea. But I would ask Senator Johanns if he would talk a little about why these three agreements with Colombia, Korea, and Panama are so important to his state of North Dakota.
Thank you, Senator Portman. It's good to be with you. I want to thank Senator Johanns for organizing this discussion on a very important issue, a very timely issue. It's good to be here with both of you, with Senator Roberts, with Senator Blunt, and Senator Isaacson. And I think, coming from our different states, we show how important these trade agreements are to our individual states across the country, but how important these trade agreements are to our nation right now. Because when we're talking trade, we're talking jobs. We need to create more jobs in this country, and it's the private sector that creates jobs. It's business investment, it's companies that create jobs. Our job, our task, our role is to create an environment where our companies and our entrepreneurs, that American ingenuity that built the greatest economic engine in the history of the world, this country, this economy, this U.S. economy, We've got to create that environment so that they can invest and create those jobs. And one of the important ways we do that is with good trade agreements. Let's make sure our companies can export their great products and services all over the world. We have got to compete in a global high-tech economy. And these trade agreements help us do it. And that's why it's so important that we move them forward. And so today we're really here on the floor of the Senate saying, why don't we have these trade agreements? Thursday night we heard from the President that we need to move forward with these trade agreements. We want to move forward with these trade agreements. We're ready to go. We have been for some time. In fact, the senators here on the floor and others have been working very hard to do everything we can to make sure we've cleared the path so that these trade agreements can come to the Senate floor. It wasn't too long ago, Senator Johanns, myself, Senator Portman, went with Senator Mitch McConnell, Senator Moran, over to South Korea to meet with President Lee. He wants the agreements. He's ready to go. As a matter of fact, he said, please ratify the agreements in your country and get them over to me because I am ready to take them to my legislators and get this approved. So he's asking for them. Second, our President said, well, there's some concerns that we need to deal with as part of these trade agreements. He said we need to address TAA, Trade Assistance Adjustment, right? So we said, okay, fine. We'll work with TAA. We'll make sure that we have enough senators that are willing to work with TAA so that it's squared away. We've got it covered. That's been communicated. So the question is, why at this point don't we have the trade agreements? That's the question I think that has to be asked. Where are they? Why aren't they here on the Senate floor so we can move forward with them? In our state, as others have mentioned, in their states, incredibly important. Just a few big stats to follow on what Senator Portman mentioned just a minute ago. For every 4% increase in trade, we create 1 million jobs in this country. For every 4% increase in trade, 1 million jobs in this country. How important is that? The U.S.-South Korea Free Trade Agreement alone, more than 250,000 jobs, more than $10 billion in increased U.S. exports to just that country alone. Well, I tell you, I can't think of a time when it's more important to create those jobs than right now, when we have more than 14 million people out of work and many, many more who are either not looking because they haven't been able to get a job or who are underemployed. Unemployment more than 9%. This is one of the ways we create that environment that get our people back to work by empowering the private sector to make that investment and create those jobs. I was just back in North Dakota, and one of the many events that I went to was an expansion of one of the Caterpillar Company's locations in West Fargo, North Dakota. They remanufacture a lot of their equipment in West Fargo, North Dakota. This equipment goes all over the world. It's part of these huge machines that CAT makes, and they use for excavating, for mining, for road building, for all these things all over the world, and they're the technology leader in the world in this huge equipment. And they bought Bucyrus, formerly Bucyrus Erie, which is huge in mining, so now they're big in the mining business. Getting into places like Colombia and Panama, incredibly important for Caterpillar. So it's not just about creating jobs in North Dakota, but think of the impact throughout the heartland in Indiana and in Illinois. Or Senator Roberts talked about agriculture. In North Dakota, we've got more cattle than people. I think we've got more than 3 million cattle. Right now, to send them into South Korea, we pay more than 40% tariff. How do we compete with Argentina or Australia in that situation? So look, this is an opportunity. This is absolutely an opportunity. We need to reach out and grab it with both hands. We've got the President right now saying, hey, pass those trade agreements. Absolutely. Please, get them down here to us. We've worked so hard to make sure we've cleared all the hurdles, TAA or whatever else is required. Bring those trade agreements to us. We stand ready to pass them. And with that, I'd like to...
Senator Johanns, would you'll just for a second?
Yep.
You're talking about being home and talking to your constituents about this, and I'm sure all of us have stories like this, but I will tell you this morning we had one of our weekly coffees, and the Ohio pork producers came, and there were about 12 pork producers from around the state of Ohio. And you know what the number one issue was they raised with me? Trade.
Right.
And getting these 3 agreements done. Why? Because it affects their prices directly. They have got to have these international sales in order to be able to make ends meet, particularly with, the price of feed going up. They've got to have these foreign markets. And it was just interesting that of all the issues that they could have raised with me, the one they were most concerned about was making sure we get these 3 agreements done and then move forward with additional agreements. Again, it's our job to provide, as you said, the environment for success. And part of that environment is to give our exporters the ability to have a level playing field to access these markets. They're the best farmers in the world. We have some of the most productive land in the world. They just need a fair shake.
Well, that's absolutely true. And in handing off the ball in this discussion, I want to go back to the trade adjustment assistance, which I mentioned earlier. There were a number of things that the administration wanted to see before bringing these trade agreements forward to us for ratification. Senator Blunt and Senator Portman were instrumental, and along with, led by these two, Senator Johanns, myself, Senator Isaacson, and others, we even signed on to a letter, actually not once, but I think twice, to make sure we got it right. But, Senator Blunt, your leadership, really in making sure that we had taken all the necessary steps so that the administration was prepared and willing to bring these agreements to the Senate floor, really have been covered. And so I thank you for that leadership, and you may want to touch on that. But I know how important the trade agreements are to the state of Missouri, but also thanks for your leadership, Senator Portman, your leadership as well, in making sure that we addressed really TAA and all of the issues that needed to be addressed as part of moving forward with these trade agreements. Senator Blunt.
Well, thank you, Senator Hoeven. I think what Senator Portman and I thought when the President said that for these 3 trade agreements to be voted on, we had to have trade adjustment assistance. We looked at the negotiated package. It wasn't exactly what any of us who signed that letter would have negotiated. But we just frankly said, look, these are the jobs that are the low-hanging fruit of job creation if we get these 3 trade bills. And we're willing to look at the Baucus Camp negotiated TAA and support it. And support it in a way that the White House can sign it and send these agreements up. Senator Hoeven mentioned, as he and I and all of us were sitting in the House chamber last week, Thursday night, listening to the President's remarks, when he said we need to pass these 3 trade agreements, I was almost sure the next sentence would be, and so tomorrow I'm sending these trade agreements up. But that next sentence didn't occur. Just like the week in August where the President was on his bus tour, and every single day on the bus tour, he said, the Congress can do something right now that would create more American jobs if they'll pass these 3 trade agreements. And every time he said that, even though I was hearing it on the TV, I couldn't help but talk back to the television or the radio and say, well, we can't pass them unless you send them up. You're absolutely right, Mr. President. This is one of the easiest things we could do to create jobs, but we have to have the agreements from you before we can vote on them. Don't tell the American people that all we have to do is pass the bill when you know that you have to send the bill up before we pass the bill. And we need these 3 agreements. As Senator Portman's pointed out, we need more agreements, but that's not really happening right now. You know, we do need the President to have the authority that I think all of us would be more than willing to give him, but that's not part of this package, the Trade Promotion Authority that we'd like to see extended into the future. But right now, we have 3 agreements that have been negotiated for a long time, and whether it's the Missouri and North Dakota beef industry, or the Missouri and Ohio pork industry, or these other, or the grain industries that we all are impacted by, there's a real opportunity here, and these markets are waiting for us. Just to look at one state, just to look at our state, since 2002, exports have increased more than 3 times faster than the state domestic product has grown. And so for those who say, well, exports cost American jobs or Missouri jobs, they clearly provide those jobs. U.S. farm exports reached an all-time high in 2010, amounting to more than $115 billion in sales. For every $1 billion worth of agricultural exports, there's an estimated 8,000 jobs. And so these countries are waiting for agreements that will increase trade in soybeans and beef and corn, in pork and dairy products and processed food, in fact, in processed goods of all kinds. But we can't get to those markets until we pass these trade agreements. All of us are eager to work with the President and get that done. All of us are eager for him to send those trade agreements up. And, you know, since these agreements were negotiated, others have negotiated agreements and launched them, and it may have been mentioned already this morning, but if it hasn't, it's important to understand that on July 1, the European Union trade agreement with South Korea went into place, and they had a 1-month, 38% increase year over year the first month of that trade agreement. The Canadian-Colombia agreement went into place on August the 15th. And having been to Colombia and worked on this for some time, there is no question that there is a preference for our goods. But once they start buying these other products, then you have to convince them, no, you need to come back to the product you would have rather had to start with if that product would have had an even shot at the marketplace. Panama negotiating all kinds of work agreements and expansion agreements on the canal that we're disadvantaged in because we haven't passed that agreement. Let's get these 3 agreements done. Let's start creating the private sector jobs that these agreements clearly will lead to. And as we have talked to the White House and the President about that, my good friend from Georgia, Johnny Isakson, has been in the middle of all those discussions. We know what can happen here, but for it to happen, we have to get these agreements sooner rather than later. Let's get them up here. Let's get them passed. Let's get them back in the hands of our new trading partners and see these jobs increase. And I'm pleased to recognize and encourage the ongoing efforts for this effort of my good friend, Mr. Isakson.
Well, thank you, Senator Flood. I better put on my microphone. Thank you, Senator Flood, and thank you very much, Senator Johanns, for organizing this colloquy. I represent a state that is the home to the second largest port on the eastern seaboard of the United States of America, the Port of Savannah. We're talking about creating jobs in America. The Port of Savannah directly employs 300,000 people in the southeastern United States. Can you think what an impact this is going to have to increase that employment if we get these free trade agreements? Let me just give you an example that's really amazing. South Korea surpassed Japan in 2010 as the second largest Northeast Asian destination for South Atlantic exports, behind only China. Second largest in all of Asia, behind only China. Most of that going out of the Port of Savannah. Most of that being agricultural products from your state and from mine. Senator Portman talked a minute ago about pork. Well, in Georgia, it's all about chickens and cattle. We're #1 in poultry, and Korea is a huge importer of our poultry, but they'd be a lot bigger with the free trade agreement. Let me give you another number that's chilling. South Korea's imports from South Korea into the United States went up by 26% last year. Our exports to them went up by 15%. That's an 11% negative in the trade deficit, which causes us tremendous problems.
Senator, the time has expired. You could ask for consent.
We have I'll ask for unanimous consent for 5 additional minutes to close, and I'll close very quickly if that's...
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Madam President. So my point is very simply this. We can help to balance our trade deficit. We can help to increase employment in the southeastern United States. We can help poultry, we can help pork, and we can help beef. It's been 968 days since the President could have sent us these free trade agreements, and he has not. My point in this debate is very simple. There's one person in the United States of America standing between us and more job creation, and it's the President of the White House, President Obama. And now I'd like to turn it over to the organizer of this event, Senator Johanns.
Madam President, I end my comments today by saying to all of my fellow senators, thank you so very much for coming to the floor today and making the case. There's an old saying in a profession I used to be engaged in, I rest my case. Well, after hearing from these fine gentlemen about the importance of these agreements and why we need to have the President send them here, I rest my case. It's going to improve job creation. It is going to improve our opportunity to export our products. It is going to level the playing field. It is going to give our producers the opportunity to reclaim market share that has been lost while we've been waiting for these agreements to come here. The final point I want to make is this. I come from a state where unemployment is right above 4%. In this recession in Nebraska, unemployment never went over 5%. In fact, as I was doing my town hall meetings across the state, I had members of my business community coming to me and saying, you know, Mike, one of the challenges we're facing is finding the workers for the jobs that we are creating. Therefore, in my state, trade adjustment assistance would not be the high priority that it is in many states. Notwithstanding that fact, when Senator Blunt came to me and said, look, the President is insisting on trade adjustment assistance as a condition to move these agreements, will you sign on to a letter that will back trade adjustment assistance? And I said, I would. Why? Because the trade agreements are important to us. It is my hope that after the many speeches we have all given, the many speeches I have given on the importance of these agreements, not only here on the Senate floor, but across this country, that the President is listening and will finally send us these agreements so we can work with the President, that we can join arms on these agreements and do everything we can to get the votes in the Senate and the House to pass them and put them on his desk and create 250,000 new jobs. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, over the past 2 weeks, I have traveled the state of Connecticut, much as you have done in the state of New York, and you have described eloquently the damage that you've seen in your state. I have seen much the same in mine. Destruction of small businesses, of homes, rivers, swelling, flooding of historic dimensions causing significant destruction, the wind and rain striking Connecticut with a fury and ferocity virtually unmatched in recent memory. I've met with families and community leaders, farmers and small businesses about the help that they will need to rebuild their homes and their businesses and their lives and their livelihoods. And it is a powerful and moving struggle. The citizens of Connecticut, like the citizens of New York and other communities struck by this storm, have reacted with determination and resolve, not with desperation or despair. They are determined and dedicated to rebuild and recover from this storm. But they need help, and that help is provided by FEMA. And we are here today, hopefully in a bipartisan effort to make sure that these communities and others like them throughout the Northeast and the United States have the hope and the really consequential aid that they need to make that recovery and rebuilding real in their lives. The early estimates suggest that the damage caused by Irene could reach more than $10 billion, making it one of the 10 costliest disasters in United States history. And the suffering and real sadness of Connecticut citizens gives us a bond and a cause in common with millions of other Americans who have suffered from hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, other natural disasters across the country. This year alone, we have seen flooding on the Mississippi and Missouri rivers and other rivers in the Midwest, devastating tornadoes in the south, wildfires in the south and west, and now Hurricanes Irene and Tropical Storm Lee. In times of natural disaster, Americans come together. In times when they face crisis, Americans rally as neighbors, as a community, regardless of specific states where they live. They come together to rebuild their homes, to make common cause, to recognize our bonds as a nation. And the spirit of our nation is that we put people above politics every time, without exception. We provide disaster relief for victims, like Connecticut residents now, with the resources they need to rebuild. Currently, FEMA funding disaster relief for over 550 disasters, including 29 in Oklahoma, 21 in Kentucky, 17 in Texas, 19 in Mississippi, and 18 in Kansas. Yet 2 weeks ago, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor stated that relief funds for Hurricane Irene would need to be offset by savings found elsewhere in the federal budget. I reject that contention, and so should this body and my colleagues from those states that I have just named and all the other states in the Union. In fact, all but a handful or less have received and are receiving disaster relief just since January of this year. We need to do everything we can to put Connecticut and America back to work, to make sure that our economy moves forward again, to create jobs and reduce the deficit. Yes, we need to reduce the deficit and the debt and cut unnecessary and wasteful spending. But we cannot permit Washington politics to create a legislative logjam and gridlock that bog down these efforts for disaster relief. The need is too urgent for thousands of families and businesses in Connecticut and around the country that have been devastated by these unprecedented floods and other natural disasters like hurricanes, wildfires, and others. Turning disaster assistance into a political football is unacceptable and unconscionable. It is a recipe for gridlock, and it's just plain wrong. It's wrong and a disservice to the men and women whose homes and businesses have been hit by the forces of nature that are unpredictable and unpreventable. And now they are attempting to rebuild their lives, and we owe it to them to match their current courage and resilience with efforts from FEMA. We can't prevent those hurricanes or tornadoes or wildfires, but we can step forward when these disasters occur and lend a hand to our neighbors, as we have done throughout our history. And we can provide these communities with the resources, the real resources they need to recover without distinguishing between them, what state they're in, what part of the country. One story from Connecticut, I think, tells a lot about the choices we face right now in our country. Mel Goldstein and his wife, Arlene, whose home was completely destroyed by flooding caused by Irene, are being told that their homeowner's insurance will not cover the damage. Their only hope of recovery is FEMA flood insurance and other FEMA assistance. Right now, they're using their savings to stay in a hotel while they rebuild their lives. Mel is one of the best-known weathermen in the state of Connecticut. He's an icon in the broadcasting world, a hero to many of us for his struggle against cancer. And his treatment in this unstable environment at this point in his recovery adds an unnecessary toll and stress to their lives. Just as we have in the past, we must come together to help folks like Arlene and Mel Goldstein to move on after the unthinkable happens in their lives. The unthinkable happened to them, to many of their neighbors in East Haven, along the shore of Connecticut, I've seen their voices and faces throughout our state, in communities big and small, where flooding has put a small business out of business, and where homes have been destroyed and people are living in shelters or with their neighbors, or were for a while. These kinds of human stories are part of the fabric of the larger story that we need to recognize here. And I hope that my colleagues will come together, as we did on the vote yesterday, to approve this measure. The vote yesterday, I think, signaled perhaps a return to the bipartisanship that should prevail when the nation confronts crisis and disaster. And our number one goal, which should be a bipartisan goal, must be to deliver help to our fellow Americans as quickly as possible. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.
With?
Without objection.
Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee left a trail of devastation across New York State. I saw firsthand the impact they left on our communities, hundreds of families living in shelters, complete homes destroyed, belongings piled up on people's front yards, small businesses uncertain whether they would even reopen, worry about whether they could hire back their employees. Farms who had no feed for livestock for days, crops and livelihoods vanishing without any trace in a single day. Crumbling bridges, washed out roads, heating oil soaking into buildings and the ground. I was born and raised in upstate New York, and I can tell you we've never seen this kind of devastation, certainly not in my lifetime. America has always stood by those who have suffered greatly from disaster, and we have always helped them to rebuild. We have an obligation to these families, businesses, farmers, to help them rebuild today. This picture is of downtown Binghamton. I met with hundreds of families displaced and placed in a Red Cross shelter at the University of Binghamton. They were on day 4 at the shelter, unclear if they would be able to see what was left of their homes. I can't fully describe the worry and fear in the eyes of parents who are in a shelter with their children. I talked to one mother who has 10 children, the youngest of whom was 2 years old, trying desperately just to keep them fed, keep them safe, but literally having no sense of when she could return to her home and what it would look like when she returned. I talked to one father whose daughter turned 13 years old that day in the shelter, and his worry was mostly, I just don't know what's in front of us. I don't know when we'll be able to go home. I don't know how much has been destroyed, and I don't know how I will rebuild. One parent that I talked to was a young mother. She held a 6-week infant in her arms. And she just said to me, I have everything I need right here. And that really exemplified the courage of Americans when they fight through suffering, the strength of New Yorkers, that they will pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and make the difference. But we here in Washington must help. In Schoharie County, the main street of the villages of both Schoharie and Middleburg, every single home was flooded. The water mark was about at 7 feet. And as you drive down the main street and you begin to talk to the business owners and the families, you can see there's not one that was left untouched. Every piece of these families' belongings are literally on the front lawns of these homes and businesses. But I watched these business owners begin to rebuild. I could see them literally bringing the mud from the basements, bringing the mud from their ground floors, pulling down all of the drywall because obviously the damage was so great it would cause long-lasting damage. And people are very worried about how they can make sure that their business is safe. This is just a snapshot right here of the town of Middleburg. Now, this is the farming community within Schoharie County. Now, these farmers have lost everything. I can tell you, the water was so strong, the surge was so great, it literally took trees out of the ground, completely uprooted and overturned. The crops that you could see on this farm, they were so covered with silt from the river, you couldn't even recognize what kind of crops they were. I saw potatoes that had been uprooted from the ground all over the road. That farmer could salvage nothing of their farm. We had one farmer who came down to meet with me because her cows were stranded. They had 800 cows stuck because the roads had been completely washed out. They had no way to get feed up to those cows. They had no way to deal with manure and dump all the milk that had to be destroyed. They needed a rescue effort. Because of the efforts of our governor, he reacted quickly. Our National Guard got up there, got food and water to those farmers. They fixed the road. The feed was delivered. But this is the kind of reaction we need from government. This is why the federal government must be there to help and protect these families and businesses. Our next picture is of Greene County. Now, Greene County, waters rushed down the main street. This is a picture of Wyndham, and destroying all businesses in its wake, families, homes, absolute destruction throughout Greene County. And I talked to just one business owner, and she had a business for children's clothing, children's needs, children's toys. She has just a couple employees, but she said, I have nothing to rebuild. I have no way that I can rebuild my business. I don't think I could rehire those employees. So the feeling of hopelessness and worry and dread and concern on top of a very tough economy anyway, these are the businesses and families and farmers that we need to help because we need them to rebuild. We need them to have the ability to hire those employees back, to produce food for our families, to make sure we have thriving communities once again. The last picture I want to show is of Keene, up in the North Country. In Keene, the river rose 22 feet above the flood stage, washing out roads and bridges, and left much of the town actually stranded for days. Half of the town's firehouse was ripped apart and swept away by the river. And up in the high peaks, the rain came down so hard that it brought huge chunks of the mountainside with it, creating slides that have changed the face of the Adirondacks for generations. As you can see, this is just 4 communities. Throughout New York State, the North Country, the Capital Region, the Mohawk Valley, Hudson Valley, Southern Tier, Long Island, no one can question the absolute devastation that these storms have left our communities. We must stand with them in their greatest time of need. Federal assistance is essential to help these families, these farmers, these businesses, and communities not only recover, but rebuild and be stronger than they were before. We need immediate funding for FEMA and the USDA disaster assistance to provide relief for these communities all across New York and all of the other states that were affected by these storms. Mr. President, I would now like to address a second issue that is causing me very grave concern. I'd like to talk for a moment about a piece of legislation that I've introduced with Senators Kirk and Lieberman to toughen the sanctions on Syria. Syrian President Assad has killed over 2,000 of his own people in an alarming torrent of violence from one of the world's most repressive regimes. 2,200 people are estimated to have died so far. Assad's aggression against the Syrian people is matched by his subversive aggression abroad. His regime is a state sponsor of terrorism, one of Iran's closest allies, and a key backer of Hamas and Hezbollah. Assad's regime has for years helped foreign fighters enter Iraq and kill our U.S. soldiers. In response to this violent crackdown, I introduced the bipartisan Syrian Sanctions Act of 2011 to hold Assad's regime accountable. This legislation would block access to the U.S. market for companies that invest in Syria's energy sectors, purchasing the country's oil, and selling gasoline to Syria. This sanction is critical, since Syria's energy sector accounts for 1/3 of that state's revenue. I asked my colleagues to sponsor S-1472 and send a clear message to Syria that until the Assad regime responds to the democratic urging of its people, halts its nuclear development, and ends the support of terrorism, Syria will not and should not have access to the global economy. And any company that does business with Syria will no longer have access to the global economy. This legislation is clear. It is very simple, that no company should be allowed to put their profits before our national security. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest